This is marriage wisdom for those who want a long marriage. One of the most misunderstood things about marriage is how resentment actually begins. Most people imagine resentment as anger. They imagine raised voices, arguments, and obvious conflict. But resentment rarely begins that way. In many marriages, resentment begins quietly. It begins in small moments that seem too minor to address. Moments where someone feels overlooked. Moments where someone feels like their effort was not noticed. Moments where someone hoped something would be acknowledged, but it never was. And at first, those moments feel too small to bring up. People often tell themselves that it is not worth creating tension over something minor. So they stay quiet. They move past it. They keep going. But the human heart remembers emotional experiences, even when we do not speak about them. When small disappointments happen repeatedly, without conversation, they begin to accumulate, not dramatically, quietly. A tone that felt dismissive, a moment where someone felt corrected rather than appreciated, a request that was forgotten again, a preference that never seemed to matter. Over time, those moments began to shape how someone feels inside the marriage, and the change can happen so slowly that neither person notices it happening. The marriage still functions. Daily life continues. Responsibilities are handled. From the outside, everything still looks stable. But inside, the emotional atmosphere of the relationship, something has shifted. Someone begins to feel less seen, less understood, less valued. When people begin to feel that way consistently, they often stop explaining themselves, not because they no longer care, but because they begin to believe that explaining themselves will not change anything. That is where emotional silence begins. And emotional silence is one of the most dangerous stages in a marriage because silence allows interpretation to replace communication. When people stop explaining how they feel, their partner must interpret behavior, and interpretation is often inaccurate. A quiet person may simply be tired, but it may be interpreted as distance. A neutral tone may simply be distraction, but it may be interpreted as disrespect. When communication becomes limited, misunderstanding increases. Over time, misunderstanding can lead to emotional distance, and emotional distance is where resentment grows most easily. Resentment is rarely loud at the beginning. It often looks like patience that slowly becomes thinner. It looks like warmth that becomes less frequent. It looks like conversations that become shorter. People may still care deeply for one another, but the emotional energy between them begins to change, and that change often goes unnoticed for a long time. This is one of the reasons people are often shocked when couples who have been married for decades suddenly decide to separate. From the outside, their marriage looked stable. There were no dramatic scandals, no obvious crisis. But what people could not see was the quiet accumulation of unresolved emotional experiences. Years of moments that were never addressed. Years of conversations that never happened. Years of feelings that were never expressed. Eventually, Those accumulated experiences create emotional exhaustion. Not explosive anger, just exhaustion. The feeling of being unseen for too long. The feeling of being unheard for too long. The feeling that explaining things again will not make a difference. When someone reaches that point emotionally, they may begin to withdraw. Not dramatically, but gradually. They become quieter. They share less. They stop correcting small things. They stop trying to repair misunderstandings because they no longer believe repair will happen. And when both people in a marriage reach that stage, the emotional connection begins to weaken significantly. This is why long marriages require intentional care, not occasional care, daily care. Small moments of attention, small moments of patience, small moments of appreciation. Because appreciation communicates value. When someone feels valued consistently, resentment struggles to take root. That does not mean long marriages are perfect. Every marriage experiences frustration. Every marriage experiences misunderstanding. Every marriage experiences moments of disappointment. But strong marriages address those moments before they accumulate. They talk about things when they are still small. They clarify misunderstandings before they grow larger. They create space for honest conversation without turning those conversations into battles. Because the goal in a long marriage is not proving who is right. The goal is protecting the emotional safety of the relationship. Emotional safety allows people to speak honestly without fear of dismissal. It allows people to say something bothered them without starting a fight. It allows people to express needs without feeling like a burden. When emotional safety exists, resentment rarely grows very far because concerns are addressed early, misunderstandings are corrected early, and small disappointments do not have time to accumulate. But when emotional safety disappears, silence often replaces conversation, and silence allows resentment to grow quietly beneath the surface. That is why emotional discipline matters so much in long marriages. Emotional discipline is the ability to pause before reacting. It is the ability to speak calmly about something that bothered you rather than allowing irritation to accumulate internally. It is the ability to choose tone carefully when addressing concerns, because tone determines whether a conversation becomes productive or defensive. Long marriages thrive when people learn to communicate concerns without attacking each other. Respectful communication keeps resentment from growing. Patience keeps misunderstandings from escalating. And appreciation keeps emotional warmth alive. Because appreciation reminds people that their efforts matter, even small efforts. A long marriage is not sustained by dramatic gestures. It is sustained by consistent care, consistent patience, consistent respect, and consistent attention to the emotional atmosphere of the relationship. That atmosphere is built through many small moments, small words, small gestures, small conversations. And those small moments, repeated over many years, are what protect a marriage from the quiet growth of resentment. Because resentment rarely appears suddenly, but intentional care can prevent it from ever taking root deeply. And that is how long marriages are protected.